Thank you, Mrs. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, situation in Europe can be best characterized by a very old English poet, Mr. Shakespeare. If it is madness, it has method. Hamlet, second act. Why Europe, especially the Eurozone, is in such a mess? First of all, nearly all states, as we heard in the speeches before, nearly all states of the southern part of the Eurozone are in a state of bankruptcy. Complete bankruptcy, and same is true for their banks. But officially, governments and managers reject to declare bankruptcy, saying it's not our bankruptcy, it is the situation of the currency. But this is one of the greatest swindle and labels I have seen in my very long life. Not the euro is in danger, not the euro is bankruptcy, only the money invested in euro, only the wrongly invested funds and assets which are nominated in this currency. And if you look to the real facts and figures, we see unbelievable magnitudes. The grand total of recorded debts in the southern part of the Eurozone is calculated by 12 to 13 billion euro. 12 to 13 billion euro, this is the German GDP 4 times. 4 times. And the question is, how can it redeemed? How can it repaid? I think it cannot be redeemed and repaid for the very simple effect. In order to repay debts, you need, as a country, as a macroeconomic unity, you need export surpluses. Export surpluses in a magnitude of 12 to 13 billion euro. Export surpluses for a group of countries never had export surpluses, living with nearly the same amount in import surpluses. So it cannot redeemed in real terms, because those group of countries cannot be restructured and reorganized from import economies into export economies. A similar situation we had in the 30s, 80 years before, with Germany and the gold standard. Also after the Black Friday in the 30s, the question came out, countries over-indebted, like Germany in those days, by war repayments, it is possible for such a country to restructure the whole economy into a surplus economy. And it was a very famous debate in those days between John Maynard Keynes and Swedish economist Olin, transfer debate. And the result was, it is the only chance for an economy to become a creditor nation and to repay debts if you be in the position to restructure the economy. This could be excluded then for Germany, and can be done in the same way now for the southern parts of the Eurozone. So the only way to handle this problem is in a financial sector, and the only way is to cancel those debts. But this way officially is blocked by an unholy alliance of governments and banks saying, these are not our debts, this is a currency, which is a complete swindle of label, a complete. The question now is, what will be the consequence of the impossibility of repay debts and the blocked way to do it in the only rational way, namely to cancel it. And this brings me to the policy of rescuing the euro. This policy of rescuing the euro is the second act in the tragedy of Mr. Hamlet. Namely, it means, on the one hand, that for the non-overdebted countries in the north of the same monetary area, you need a lot of money in order to take over the debts. And this money, at the moment, and since 2-3 years, is offered by the European Central Bank. What we have seen in the last 3.5 years is an oversupply in new electronic money created by the European Central Bank system on different ways, which are very technically complicated, but can be summarized as follows. 1 billion more an open refinancing window for the European banking system, nearly at an interest rate of 0.75. Another nearly billion on the way of so-called target. Target, it's a complicated word and abbreviation for a very simple thing. European Central Bank can have an open account against each other. Every European Central Bank can get money from the other. So, central banks of Greece, Spain, and the other debtor countries got the money via ECB, more or less, from the only 3-4 countries in the whole system having surpluses, namely Germany, Netherlands, Finland, Austria. This is the 2nd billion of new created electronic euro. The next 2 billions are more or less credits of the ECB in a commercial sector. The balance sheet of the ECB is extended in the last 2 years by more than 2 billion. And the last act in this program of money creation is now the announcement of Mr. Draghi to buy in an unlimited amount the bonds of the over-indebted countries in the south. Some colleagues of mine and myself, we have launched a complaint against this next break in the treaty of EU and in the statutes of the ECB. Just the process is underway since November 15. And my contribution to this complaint was a very simple one, saying, if this new policy of ECB is what it has to be, namely monetary policy, and not monetary financing of budgets, then the receipts of all those buyings of the ECB, the monetary counterpart has to be sterilized. So the seller of the bonds, states as well as banks cannot get the money. It must be blocked on the accounts of the ECB. I'm very curious to expect what our judges will say to this idea, but I'm sure they will say what they have said since 12 years in all complaints we have done in this case, namely, German judges are no economists. They are not allowed to approve the economic as well as the political consequences of adjudication, which is an impossible position, as you can imagine, because in justice of constitution is not an advocate and is not notar. What is a notar? Notary. Yeah. He has not only in a formal sense to approve new paragraph and new laws, but in a material sense, what are the consequences? What are the effects in political as well as in economic terms? Which are the damages coming from such a new break in the constitution as well as in the treaties of Europe? But in this respect, we are more or less in Germany hopeless, confronted with only a formal legislation and adjudication and not with a real one. The question arises now, given all the facts and figures we have, in huge money creation on the one side, vis-à-vis a more or less zero growth in real terms on the other side. So a big overhang in money against real added value. It means inflation, at least potential for inflation, in an unlimited amount. But on the other hand, and this is part of the madness of the whole policy, the debtors, having no haircut and having no chance to repay their debts, are obliged to save in macroeconomic terms, namely to increase taxes, to decrease income, rents and all the other one, and from a smaller GDP to pay more for repayment of debt, which is an impossibility, and some of my speakers before have demonstrated this for Spain, as I heard, and even for Greece. It is an humiliation of people in those countries to urge them and to force them to pay more out of a reduced income and chance to survive. But this is the reality. And if I look to the Mediterranean world of today, you see a complete chaos. On the north side, the Islamic side, you have a rebellion youth fighting for more freedom and liberty. And on the other side, on our side, on the European side, you find a frustrating youth confronted with no chances for a good life in the future. I am melancholic because 10 years ago I wrote a book about the Mediterranean Sea as the center of the world economy 2,000 years ago. But now, this center of the antique world economy is now a separation between two regions being in revolution for different reasons. for different reasons. One part is fighting for more freedom, and the other part is fighting for better chances of life, in a material sense, which they could have because Europe is not a developing or an underdeveloped part of the world. What are ways out of this mess? Are there ways out of this mess? And I think there are two very simple and very rational ways if you understand what is the real problem behind the euro and the eurozone. And the real problem behind this multinational currency, a currency in the beginning for 11 and now for 17 nations, shows us the separation between a country, a state on one side, and its currency on the other side cannot be made. State and currency are forming an identity, because any state needs its currency in order to formulate a rational policy in terms of employment, in terms of social values, in terms of structural imbalances. It can be done only with the own money, with the own interest rate, and with the own rules about the banking sector. So, as a consequence of this multinational currency system we have in Europe installed and introduced, the euro for any country, for any economy, doesn't matter if it is in the north or in the south, is more or less foreign exchange. It's a foreign currency, a currency like a dollar for Europe, like a renminbi for Europe, or a Swiss franc for Europe, or another currency. And this is a stupidity never happened in the 3,000 years of monetary history I know and I have studies. So the way out is to cancel the situation and to come back to the identity of currency and state, and safeguard your currency by your national legislation and your national laws, if it is done, since we have money as a public good. And this is a very long time. And what about the euro? I think the euro has, in such a system, a real chance for surviving, which is good for face-saving for our politicians and European fanatics. And what could be the role of the euro in such a system of coming back to national currency? Very simple. If you remember the long, very successful history of monetary integration in Europe, Europe since Second War had at least 3 very successful monetary arrangements with its neighbors. First was European Payment Union, directly after the war in the years 1947 to 1997, which was established with help of United States, with some funds from the Marshall aid. This European Payment Union was transferred into a European Monetary Agreement, EMA, with beginning of the common domestic market, because the start of the domestic market was also the start for a capital market in after-war Europe, and therefore only a payment union on the level of central bank was not sufficient enough. Therefore, the EMA introduced and integrated the money market into the system. And this system was continued by the European exchange rate mechanism of 1979, which was an idea of then French President Giscard d'Estaing and German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt. And the only difference to the former system was the introduction of a European currency unit, European currency union, an abbreviation ECU. And French was very proud about this name because they could say écu, and écu was the name of a very old-fashioned gold coin of Louis XIV, 300 years ago. And what was the difference to the system with the euro? Very simple. At first, in all the former system, you had national currency and therefore the capability of states to formulate and execute their own policy, which is very important. Secondly, you had instead of a European Central Bank an automatic mechanism of foreign exchange rates. Nearly every currency with any other currency was linked with an exchange rate mechanism. If the country was making good policy, you had a trend of appreciation, and in the opposite, a trend of depreciation. And one of the good results of the danger of depreciation was avoiding foreign indebtedness. In those days, no Greece, no Spain, no Italy was over-indebted in terms of credits from their neighbors, because the danger of possibly depreciation, and depreciations happened very often, was the best remedy against to import too many credits from the outside world, to avoid over-indebtedness. And the second element of the former system was the need, in order to calculate the foreign exchange rates and the calculations, in unit, in account unit. This was the ECU. So, what will be the future chance of an euro in a revised system of national currency being a second ECU? Why not? A second ECU under the name of Europe would give the euro an enormous attractivity, because you can a currency depreciate but not a unit. Since all currencies have to depreciate against the unit is the only monetary entity, the only monetary union which is stable by definition. So we could get a stable euro as a unity of account in a multi-currency system of Europe. This would be the best solution, the euro as a second ECU. But if you want to have a stronger symbol of Europe, would be a chance to give the unit the character of a real currency. Why not? Why should in federal Europe, a Europe of not only 70, but of 28 nations, why should such a Europe not live with two currencies, a national one and a supranational one, namely euro not as a unit, but as a parallel currency to all in Europe existing national currencies. And even in such a system, the euro would become a very stable one, in contrary to the past, because any trend for depreciation for the euro would force and urge the European Central Bank issuing such a currency to strengthen it. So we would have what we miss today in Europe, not in the world, competition of currencies. And competition of the European currency with additional currency, namely the euro, would, of course, stabilize the whole system, namely the euro, as well as the other ones. So, in order to come to a conclusion, even if this new euro is another sort of label swindle, namely to say we have the euro and we have the euro not, But in this case, the euro would have, first of all, a chance to survive, and all the stupid governments in Europe could say, we never have capitulated against our critics. We could save and rescue the Europe to a good target, to a good aim, and to a good happy end. Thank you.